revenue, totaling $3.9 trillion, all of it deficit financed. Now, we will add $64 billion more this year to reducing the deficit. So if we have a $1.3 trillion annual deficit this year, it'll bring it down to $1.24 trillion. Now, many of us feel, certainly on this side, that deficit doesn't matter. But it does matter because we have another deficit, a deficit in the investment in the education of our children, an investment in the training and skills of our workforce, and the physical infrastructure of our country. And we will have none of those resources to make that investment after we make this vote tonight. And the problem is we set up 3 more fiscal cliffs. We're going to have to deal with the debt ceiling. We're going to have to deal with the continuing resolution expiration, and we're going to have to deal with the sequester. And all that's left is spending cuts. So the only question we have to ask ourselves is, what programs do we cut, and how deep do we cut them? We're going to look back on this night and regret it, notwithstanding the fact that 95% of us apparently will vote for it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp.
I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman's prepared to close. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
I now yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Engel.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise today to support this bill because essentially we have 2 choices here. We either vote for this bill and we prevent us from going over the cliff, or we go over the cliff, and that would certainly wreak havoc with the markets, with everything else. But it never should have come to this. We should have been negotiating and passing a balanced bill. The American people are really fed up with what they see, the dysfunctional Congress. And you know, Harry Truman, back in 1948, when he was running for president, campaigned against the 80th, and he called it the do-nothing 80th Congress. That do-nothing Congress passed 3 times as many bills as the 112th Congress did. And so here we are at the last minute, and we're rushing to pass this bill. It never should have happened this way. I commend President Obama and Vice President Biden for protecting the middle class with this, for doing the best that they can. But my friends and my colleagues, we are going to have to work to meet in a sensible center. We are going to have to not play these brinkmanship games. The American people don't want it. President Obama won re-election campaigning for the middle class. This keeps those priorities, and we ought to support it.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Camp, continues to reserve. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
I now yield 2 minutes to Danny Davis, our colleague from Illinois, and soon rejoining us on Ways and Means.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I've never seen a compromise where everybody got everything that they wanted or liked everything that they got. I certainly don't like everything that I see in this bill, and I certainly didn't get everything that I wanted. But I do like the fact that senior citizens can go to the doctors because they're being paid a reasonable rate. I don't like the fact that some of the health programs in my communities and disproportionate hospitals all across the country are being cut. I just got 2 phone calls a few minutes ago from 2 constituents, one from Oak Park, Illinois, one from Westchester. And they both did all that they could do to convince me to vote against this bill. And after listening to them, I thanked them, but then I told them, do you know that 320,000 people in our state relied upon unemployment insurance benefits last year? I don't know how I could face those individuals with no hope, no possibility, no idea that they're going to have a check in the mail. Well, when I go to church on Sunday, I know that I will see people with the assurance that pretty soon an unemployment check is in the mail. And that's one of the reasons that, yes, I will vote for this bill, because it's good legislation. People need it right now, not next year, not next month, not next week. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Levin.
I now, with pleasure, yield 3 minutes to another member of our leadership, the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Clyburn.
Gentleman from South Carolina is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for yielding me the time. Mr. Speaker, it's tempting to say it's about time the House put aside extreme partisanship and work together on a compromise to address the nation's most pressing issues. But in reality, it is far past time that we put aside extreme partisanship. Throughout the entirety of the 112th Congress, we have seen narrow political interests placed ahead of the public interest. So here we are on New Year's night with the clock running out on the very existence of this Congress, finally considering bipartisan legislation to provide middle-class tax cuts, require the wealthiest to once again pay their fair share so we can grow the economy, create jobs, and protect the most vulnerable in our society. It is indeed well past time we got about the people's business. Mr. Speaker, in 2011, I served on the Biden group of both Republican and Democratic representatives and senators who worked with the Vice President on our nation's fiscal issues. We made good progress in those talks until our Republican friends walked away, fearing the wrath of the Tea Party. I also served on the Bipartisan Joint Select Committee on Deficit Reduction, the so-called Super Committee that spent countless hours discussing these issues in detail. It was very clear that the elements of a fair and balanced fiscal plan were achievable. But at the end of the process, the Republican leaders refused to compromise, and the Super Committee failed. So here we are. While this is not a perfect bill, and I have serious concerns about some of the cuts it contains, it does contain the element of fairness. This bill protects the middle class.
Minute.
Gentleman is recognized for an additional 60 seconds.
Thank you. This bill protects the middle class and working people with a more progressive tax code than we've had in a very long time. And this bill prevents the Meat Act's approach of budget cuts that could do more severe damage to our national defense and important domestic priorities. Mr. Speaker, I hope that the partisanship of the 112th Congress will end this week with the end of the 112th Congress. And I am hopeful that the 113th Congress can work together toward honorable compromises that get the people's business done. I urge a yes vote. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back his time.